Pakistan's entire budgetary allocation is unreal. More than 50% on the face of it gets eaten up by military and the security paradigm that Pakistan insists is essential for its existence. Pakistan's military has a history of creating ghosts like a possible Indian invasion and then getting the country to pay for it, and then them enjoying the life of whiskey, champagne, and caviar, and getting the jihadis to infiltrate into India to create havoc, to fight a cheap war against India and keep India on the tenterhooks. See, if you observe Pakistan carefully, you will find that there are telltale signs in the Pakistani economy which needed to be addressed much more seriously than the false promises they make to IMF and other donors. See, currently, Pakistan is waiting for that 1.1 or 1.9 billion bailout from the IMF. And that's part of a $7 billion package that Pakistan had engaged the IMF in 2019 under Imran Khan. Now, the big question is that 1 billion or 2 billion bailout good enough for Pakistan to get back on the rails as a normal economy? Or is this just another patch they will override and then they will decide how to address issues internally? So there are 5 or 6 issues and I'll elaborate on them. The first issue is, where does all the money in Pakistan go? And that is what the problem with the donors is, that when you put money into Pakistan, now whether it's China or the Gulf states or the IMF and earlier the United States, none of them have said so on their face that Pakistan's entire budgetary allocation is unreal. More than 50% on the face of it gets eaten up by military and the security paradigm that Pakistan insists is essential for its existence. Many of us will argue that is nonsensical because Pakistan's military has a history of creating ghosts like a possible Indian invasion and then getting the country to pay for it, and then them enjoying the life of whiskey, champagne, and caviar, and getting the jihadis to infiltrate into India to create havoc, to fight a cheap war against India and keep India on the tenterhooks. That needs to be understood more clearly, why the military eats up money. The second thing is, nobody of any consequence, especially the rich elite in Pakistan, pays taxes. So if you don't collect taxes, and that was the same problem in Sri Lanka, the IMF and the world was saying that unless you enhance tax collection, how do you pour money back into running the country? Why should somebody else pay for you to run your country when you don't listen to those countries otherwise? For example, the US is known to have given Pakistan between 1950 and around 2010 something close to $70 billion. And then in that overlapping period between Pakistan becoming their non-NATO military ally post 9/11 attacks, which I would argue Pakistan also had a role to play in, the US since then and until they stopped funding them, I think about 5 years ago, the US had poured in $33 billion there. So Pakistan's got used to building these strategic scenarios and therefore getting countries to pay for their bailout. So what somebody has called is developed a psychology of being a rentier economy, which means you rent out your strategic space and get people to pay for it. And then enjoy your lifestyle, which the military enjoys. Some years ago, at a lit fest in Mumbai, I had asked this question for all those who claim that we could have good relations with Pakistan. I said, see, India's generals drive in Marutis, and it's not impossible to maintain that culture even after retirement. Pakistan's generals drive Mercedes and the equivalent cars. So maintain that lifestyle, they need more and more money coming in. So that money is diverted from money which is desperately needed for Pakistan's development or education or infrastructure, etc. They don't allow it to go. And the author of a book on Pakistan Army fighting to the end, Christine Fair, has said that those prime ministers in Pakistan who don't accept the Army's predominant role in budget, strategic affairs, nuclear weapons, etc., they are told either you accept it or we will not let you get sworn in. Benazir faced this plight and she tried hedging around for a week till she gave in. And the others who opposed them publicly are kicked out, whether Nawaz Sharif or recently Imran Khan. Third is, if Pakistan is so broke, why is it so rapidly increasing its nuclear arsenal? Because nuclear weapons cost money. So who's paying for it? Is Pakistan paying for it? Or its friends in the Gulf who are using Pakistan as a storehouse for nuclear weapons? So the day Iran goes formally public with its nuclear threats against the Arab world, Pakistan then supplies the nuclear arsenal that the Gulf desperately needs as an equalizer. And therefore, you find every time Pakistan's in the dumps, the Gulf state come back with some kind of restructured loan or petrol and oil handouts, etc., etc. And the fourth thing is Pakistan's China-centric arrangement, where China is all sugar and honey when it wants you to fall into a debt trap, as we've seen with Sri Lanka. But then later on, the Chinese get the country to pay up or hand away some real estate, which the Chinese use for their strategic agenda. So in the case of Pakistan, it's the POK areas, which is part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, or the Gwadar port, which China needs desperately to dominate the Arabian Sea's waters because its navy and maritime ambitions are becoming bigger and bigger. And it's not bending to Pakistan's repeated request to restructure China's financial loan arrangements for Pakistan to buy electricity, power, etc., from what is being produced by waters that technically Pakistan controls the territory, POK. I wouldn't say it's Pakistani territory, but it controls that territory. But China is producing electricity, etc., and sending it to Pakistan at phenomenal rates. So Pakistan's got a problem there. Then the last point for Pakistan's economy is, forget the floods and the devastation. They don't happen every year. And that's a big blow to their economy. So it's bad times now. In addition to a bad economy, even nature is not letting them off the hook. But the problem in Pakistan is, how do you get money to run your country? So if military security issues take up money, then what do you put back into the country, whether in education, infrastructure, etc.? Now, virtually every major project in Pakistan, from hospitals to the water distribution system to the electricity distribution system, there's something called WAPTA, right? There's a body that controls Pakistan's power and energy and other initiatives. That's all run by the military and ex-military men. There's a history to it. When Pakistan became a newly formed country, Britain left behind money for the armies of India and Pakistan, which was all run by the British. India gave individual sums to ex-servicemen who took part in the World War. Pakistan made a corpus out of it and created something called a Fauji Foundation. The Fauji Foundation is a quasi-military body because it's run by retired military officers. And they, in turn, employ only retired people, even in electricity distribution companies, DISCOMs. So the government of Pakistan can't alter their salaries. So there's a discom, supposing, for example, which is running in huge losses. The people are enjoying the same perks, privileges, and salaries and bonuses as people who are running in profit, because they are all ex-servicemen, or military salaries as regularized. So if you're a military man serving in a peace area, you get the same salary as a military man in an operational area, and he gets a little extra allowance. That's what happens in India. It happens all over the world. So you can't alter their salaries. Likewise, the Pakistan government cannot ask accountability from the military on the money they spend, or audit, or anything. So the whole thing is such a vicious cycle that it's not the question of pouring money in. Having poured the money, what can the world expect next? Can Pakistan turn it around? No. The bottom line is, some estimates say Pakistan needs $30 billion a year just to keep functional. As far as the floods are concerned, one of the reasons they're also getting a big blow to their economy, because bulk of the crops Pakistan produces, which are exported, such as rice, wheat, cotton, etc., which they have a big market in Europe and elsewhere, that's all water-centric. So they also argue that India is not giving them enough water because of the Indus Waters Treaty, and therefore their products are suffering. On the contrary, they get more than 80%, actually 80.48% of the water of the Indus Waters Treaty, and what we get 19.52 or 19.48, one of the two figures there. We're not even using all of that. So they're even getting more than 80%, because water is something you can't just stop. It keeps flowing. So there is that problem also in Pakistan, that they have to restructure their crops and their growth. It won't happen overnight. If Pakistan has to bounce back, they have to adopt structural measures, and this is what the IMF is saying, to get their economy to at least rework itself around paying for Pakistan's existence. And that's not going to happen unless they increase taxes across the board. If the elites don't want to pay tax, then you have a GST across the board that gets paid. And because Pakistan has this entire up and down story with its economy, there's a large black market that does the rounds in Pakistan. And this black market and unofficial trade has also led to a big drugs market, which is something that the Pakistan army is involved in. And this is the drugs that come out of Afghanistan's poppy fields. And the Pakistan army, then by the time it crosses the Khyber Pass and comes into Pakistan, the drug trade produces for Pakistan's illegal economy anything from $20 to $25 billion a year. And that's the money that runs the country. As I said, $30 billion a year is what they need. And the $5-6 billion handout they hanker for is basically, sums it all up, is what they need to keep things going. The challenge for India is, if the Pakistani military and the deep state doesn't have money in its hands, then it can't keep paying the jihadi groups for initiating proxy wars in Afghanistan and India. And if you don't pay them, they need to pay their bills, they need to pay their cadres, etc., because they're an army which is in Shalwar Kurta. So they get restless, which is happening in Pakistan. And that restlessness leads to them contesting the rule of law in the country. The next point is that Pakistan also has other groups that have challenged the Pakistani state. So it's a state at war with itself. The classic example more recently is the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. They've been attacking, they've been suicide bombing right inside military areas in Peshawar. They've been attacking in mosques because they are Salafi Wahhabi centric. And Pakistan, like India, had a traditional culture of Sufism. And they want to do away with moderates in Pakistan. So they're shaking the foundations. And finally, and most importantly, something I wrote about recently, that, when things come from push to shove, the military could divert Pakistan's attention by going into another military adventure against India. Nothing unites a people more than the idea of a conflict against an arch enemy that you could possibly win. And it'll give them a temporary reprieve. We could use it as a blackmail tactic also, that we will back off from a Kargil type scenario if you give us $6 billion or $10 billion to shut up. And finally, and which is what is America's nightmare, they could sell their nuclear warheads and gain money, or they could sell another part of real estate of Pakistan, which they've done with Gwadar, that has been bought off as a port by the Chinese. They have virtually sold off and hawked off areas from the Shaksgam Valley to virtually the entire northern Gilgit-Baltistan region, what we call northern POK. And it all, China is happy to pay a price because China needs the waters of the Indus rivers to store them and to use chemical processes with sand and other things to produce silicon wafers and microchips. So the future conflicts are going to be water wars. And Pakistan, again, is bestowed with nature with quite a bit of water supplies. It's another story that they've mismanaged that also and passed the blame to India.